The sun hung low in the sky as I stood at the edge of our yard, my heart heavy with the weight of suspicion. For years I had believed in the sanctity of my marriage to Jessica, a woman whose laughter filled our home with warmth and whose smile could light up the darkest days. But lately a shadow had crept into our lives: late nights at the office, sudden trips to the gym, and whispers on the phone that abruptly stopped when I entered the room. The nagging feeling that something was amiss turned my love into a twisted blend of doubt and anxiety. Determined to uncover the truth without directly confronting her, I devised a plan to form a neighborhood watch group. Our community was tight-knit, and I knew I could use this to my advantage. I invited neighbors over for a meeting, spinning it as a way to enhance security and foster camaraderie among residents. Little did they know that my ulterior motive was to keep an eye on Jessica and her potential lover, a man I had seen around the neighborhood, David, a charming and athletic fellow who seemed to be a little too friendly with my wife. At our first meeting, I took the lead, outlining the various ways we could keep each other informed about any suspicious activity in the area. As the discussion progressed, I noticed the glances exchanged between Jessica and David. They were too frequent, too conspiratorial, and they did not go unnoticed by me. After the meeting, I approached Jessica, keeping my tone light. "I think this neighborhood watch is a great idea. We can all look out for each other," I said, watching her face for any signs of guilt. She smiled, nodding enthusiastically, but I could see the tension beneath her facade. With the neighborhood watch established, I began to manipulate it into a tool for surveillance. I crafted scenarios that would inevitably lead to Jessica and David crossing paths, all under the guise of community activities. I organized weekend barbecues, block parties, and group outings to local parks. Each event was an opportunity for Jessica and David to be together, and I positioned myself as a benevolent neighbor, always ensuring they were present in the same space. As the events unfolded, I carefully monitored their interactions, noting the furtive glances and whispered conversations that seemed to grow more brazen with each encounter. It wasn't long before the neighborhood watch grew suspicious, and I used their curiosity to my advantage. At our next meeting, I shared a story about a recent incident where a neighbor had caught someone sneaking around their backyard. I embellished the details, fueling the fire of paranoia. "We should be vigilant," I urged, my voice steady. "You never know who might be watching or what they might be up to." The others nodded in agreement, eyes darting around as if they were suddenly aware of unseen eyes lurking in the shadows. As the tension mounted, I orchestrated scenarios where Jessica and David would inadvertently get caught. One Saturday, I planned a group walk through the nearby woods, knowing Jessica often jogged in that area. I casually mentioned to everyone that it would be a good opportunity to enjoy the fresh air while keeping an eye on any suspicious characters. When we arrived, I subtly guided the group toward a narrow path that led deeper into the woods, all the while keeping an eye out for my wife. It wasn't long before I spotted her and David, running side by side, laughter echoing through the trees. I feigned surprise when I stumbled upon them. "Oh, what a coincidence," I exclaimed, forcing a grin as I approached. Jessica's face drained of color, and David's grin faltered as they exchanged alarmed glances. "Just enjoying the day," I asked innocently, my heart racing with satisfaction. They stammered out excuses, but the embarrassment was palpable. I could feel the weight of their guilt hanging in the air, and I reveled in the moment. The neighborhood watch became increasingly vigilant, and my plan was working. I encouraged gossip and speculation, planting seeds of doubt among the residents. During our meetings, I would casually mention seeing suspicious behavior around our street, noting that some couples had been acting strangely. It fueled the fire of suspicion, and soon enough, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with theories. Jessica and David were now caught in a web of scrutiny, their actions scrutinized by the very community I had brought together to surveil them. In another stroke of genius, I arranged a neighborhood garage sale, knowing Jessica loved organizing events. I strategically placed David's house nearby and encouraged him to set up a booth. The day arrived, and the atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and bargaining. I made sure to keep an eye on Jessica, guiding neighbors to her booth and subtly pushing them to engage in conversations. It wasn't long before I caught David approaching, and I maneuvered myself into their vicinity, pretending to sort through items while listening intently. As I watched the two interact, I couldn't help but notice how their body language had changed. The stolen glances, the nervous laughter, every moment was a small victory for me. I decided to escalate things further. I leaned in casually to my neighbor, John, and whispered, "I've heard some strange noises coming from Jessica's car lately. It seems odd, don't you think?" His eyes widened with intrigue, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. I could sense the gossip spreading like wildfire, further isolating Jessica as more neighbors turned their attention to her actions. The climax of my plan arrived at the neighborhood watch meeting I had organized for that following week. I had arranged for a group discussion on neighborhood integrity, cleverly framing it to include stories of deception and betrayal. I casually recounted the events of the garage sale, weaving in my fabricated concerns about Jessica's erratic behavior. "Isn't it curious how people can hide in plain sight?" I mused, glancing at Jessica, who was sitting across the room. Her eyes flickered with panic, and I knew the net was tightening around her. As the discussions continued, I noticed a neighbor, Emily, raise her hand. "I think we should address any concerns we have about our neighbors openly," she suggested. "If we're truly looking out for each other, shouldn't we share what we know?" The room buzzed with agreement, and I seized the opportunity. "That's a great idea, Emily. Why don't we all share any suspicions we might have?" I could see the fear on Jessica's face as she realized that this could lead to her downfall. One by one, the neighbors began to voice their concerns, each comment building the tension in the room. "I've seen Jessica and David together quite a bit," one neighbor remarked, and I felt a surge of triumph. Jessica's eyes darted around the room, her mouth opening and closing as if she were trying to find the words to defend herself. Finally, as the accusations grew, Jessica stood up, her voice trembling. "This is ridiculous. I can't believe you would all think such things." The room fell silent, the weight of her outburst hanging in the air. "I'm not hiding anything. This is just a misunderstanding." I stepped forward, feigning concern. "But Jessica, isn't it interesting that you've been seen with David quite a lot? What do you have to say about that?" The room buzzed with murmurs, eyes shifting between Jessica and me, the tension thickening. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Jessica stammered, "David is just a friend. We've been working on a project together for the neighborhood watch." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I couldn't let her get away with it. I leaned back against the wall, crossing my arms with a knowing smile. "But a project that requires so many late-night meetings, and those secretive texts you've been sending? What's really going on, Jessica?" The room shifted again, eyes narrowing as the truth began to dawn on them. Jessica's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and I reveled in the chaos I had orchestrated. As the whispers grew louder, I could see the allies I had unwittingly created around me. The very people I had brought together to serve my agenda now looked at Jessica with suspicion. With every accusation, Jessica's confidence waned, and the facade she had clung to began to crumble. "I've made mistakes," she finally admitted, her voice shaking. "But I never meant for it to get to this point." The confession hung in the air, a testament to the unraveling of her carefully constructed lies. I felt a sense of victory wash over me, knowing that my plan had worked. The neighborhood watch, once a tool for safety, had become a mirror reflecting the cracks in our lives. It had forced Jessica into the light, exposing her deception for everyone to see. As the meeting concluded, I watched Jessica gather her things, her face a mix of shame and disbelief. The air was thick with tension, and I knew this was only the beginning of the fallout. In the days that followed, the whispers in the neighborhood grew louder. Jessica became a target of scrutiny, the gossip spiraling out of control. I felt a bittersweet satisfaction knowing that I had orchestrated it all, pulling the strings of our community to expose her betrayal. Eventually, Jessica and I faced the repercussions of that night together. We had entered a new phase of our marriage, one marked by honesty, albeit forced. I had manipulated the circumstances to unveil the truth, but now we had to navigate the aftermath. Jessica was left to reckon with her choices, the community's judgment looming over her like a shadow. Our conversations shifted from deception to redemption. As we sat together on the porch, I felt the weight of what I had done while I had exposed her affair. I had also torn down the walls that kept us apart. Jessica slowly began to open up about her feelings, her fears, and the reasons behind her actions. In a strange twist, my scheme had inadvertently created space for honesty in our marriage. We began to rebuild not just our relationship, but also our lives within the community. The neighborhood watch evolved into something different, a genuine effort to support one another and strengthen our bonds. The very group I had manipulated now served as a foundation for healing and growth. As the weeks turned into months, Jessica and I learned to navigate our new reality together. The embarrassment faded, replaced by a determination to move forward. We confronted the demons of our past, slowly piecing together the fragments of trust that had once been shattered. In the end, I realized that while my methods had been questionable, the outcome had forced us to face the truth. The journey toward healing was fraught with challenges, but together we forged a new path, one built on transparency and understanding. The shadows of betrayal had been illuminated, and with it, the possibility for a stronger, more honest future.